We'll call the Powhatan County Board of Supervisors meeting to order. We'll let everybody get up here. Thank you, Mr. Norvig. Let's stretch it.
I left a big tip.
All right, we'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Cabell, and Larry will lead us in the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, we come again to do the county's business, the people's business tonight. Help us to be faithful to our calling, to be good servants of the public trust, and to be honorable to each other in our discussions. Also, we would ask a special blessing for the first responders in our county, many of whom are here tonight, and also pray for safety for the back-to-school folks, both teachers, administrators, and especially our students. We just pray for a special outpouring of your blessing on Powhatan County, and we hope to honor you before we meet again. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Norvig.
Yes, sir.
We'll now move on to item 4, request to add, delete, or change order presentation. I do have one addition. It's a resolution put in front of you on the packet. It's a resolution requesting state road acceptance by VDOT for streets in Ashton, Section 2. And I've discussed this with the county administrator, and I feel like it's a good item to add to the agenda. It's nothing more than we would normally see in our consent agenda, but we'll add this to item 10C, which is a new business item. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
No, motion and a second to add item resolution 2017-67. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
I think it's, I'm showing it's 68, sir.
Excuse me? It is 68, I apologize. So, 2017-68, so I don't think we need to do any extra motion, do we, Mr. Latchney? No. Okay. So now can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor of the motion as presented? Aye. Those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Okay. We'll now move on to our first of 2 public comment periods. We invite members of the public to share their thoughts and matters and issues that are germane to the county business. If you're here to speak on an item on tonight's agenda that is held in a public hearing, you must wait and share your thoughts during the public hearing on each specific item. This is not a forum for political campaigning or promoting a business. Please keep your comments focused on the issues and subject matter over which this board has responsibility, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes if you're speaking as an individual and 5 minutes if you're representing a group. And so that we can get your name and address correct in the minutes, could you please sign in before or after you finish speaking? Thank you. Seeing no one for the first public comment period, I'll close that. We will have a second public comment period later on. We'll now move on to item 7, which is consent agenda.
Move that we approve as presented.
Second.
Any questions on? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We'll now move on to item 8A. Appointments to boards, commissions, and committee. We have one appointment to the Board of Equalization. This is found on page 21 of your packet. And this is in actually District 3, the application is for. We have an opening, and we have 3 openings, actually. We have an opening in District 5, and an opening in District 1. So I know Mr. Williams briefly talked to about it. We haven't gotten an application, so I guess what we need is an application from the applicant, and we can put it on our October meeting.
Mr. Melton, I talked to the current member today. He is interested in continuing. If you'd send him or have staff send an application to him, he'd be glad to fill it out.
Okay. Can you, Ted, make note of that to send that to Mr. Buck Buchanan, the representative from District 1? We do not, Mr. Tucker, maybe you can help me here, or Tom. In reading this, we don't have to appoint by district. I think we have tried to always have a representative from each district.
Right,
correct?
that's just a gentleman's agreement, not a
Okay.
requirement.
Okay. So again, the application tonight is for the representatives from District 3, which is Carl Lipscomb. So, you want to make a motion?
Yep. I would make the motion that we reappoint Mr. Lipscomb to the Board of Equalization.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. So let's try to be prepared. I know the Board of Equalization will get busy here soon. So if we have any other openings, or if you need any help in your district, please let us know, and we'll all try to pitch in to make sure we have representatives. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 9A, old business. Page 27 is your strategic action plan update. Mr. Voorhees, you're going to...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Your report is there. We've highlighted changes in yellow, and I'm certainly available to respond to questions.
So the update, of course, some of us, Mr. Williams, I think, attended the first public meeting for Planning Commission held on the update of the conference plan, so I see that's been updated to October of this year. And then we anticipate having it sometime in November of this year.
Yes, sir. And a few other things. We certainly, the board adopted the Route 60 plan, so that's been accomplished. We've also held a joint meeting with the school board, and that's on here. We have another one scheduled for December. We have a couple of funding requests in here that are contained within your financial package that you'll see later this evening that speak to training the staff on performance-based budgeting. Also, we'll be doing some evaluation of performance-based budget software and some business improvement process training, BPR initiative. Those things are all indicated in the strategic action plan, and aspects of those initiatives will be addressed with some of the carryover funding in your financial package.
Okay. Any questions on the strategic action plan? Thank you, Mr. Voorhees, for the updates. We'll now move on to 9B, status report on the bonded projects, found on page 39 of your packet.
Again, Mr. Chairman, board members, we've got reports here, and we've highlighted some of the changes. I think we're happy to report to the public that we toured jointly with the school board the middle school project, as well as the bus maintenance facility project, and both, I think we're very impressed. We were very impressed with both facilities. It looks like the garage facility will be substantially complete next month, and hopefully in operation in November. School will take a little longer, but I think we saw a lot of thoughtfulness in how aspects of that facility were designed that will put the taxpayers' money to good use and give us long service for our school children. So those are a couple things. We also saw the water tower going up. Some of the steel's on site. The foundation's been laid, and a number of the steel segments are on site. So good progress on those. Also, my goal for this project, the Village Building parking lot project, will be that at the next meeting, we can say it's completely completed. It's substantially complete now, but we certainly will welcome the lighting as the winter comes upon us. So any questions on any of those projects? We have staff here. We'd be happy to respond.
I'll agree that the project, I drove behind the building today for the first time in months and months. It looks nice back there, and I think it definitely, so the parking lot that's on the gravel is just kind of an overflow for when there's baseball fields, the baseball games back there for the youth? Okay. And I saw where they did some ditch improvements and water runoff, which I think's nice, because if you ever had a grandchild back there playing, it was a lot of standing water at times back there, so maybe a small swimming pool.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
for the public's edification, could we take just one line item and go through the chart that was just up there, if you bring back the chart. Can we do the middle school? And Mr. Voorhees, would you tell us what the 4 columns are, what the amount of money is for the middle school, and what does it mean by proffers and general fund and bond, just in a sentence definition per?
I don't think we have it.
Not the amount, just what the headers mean.
So on the cover page, I guess that's page 39, Mr.
Yes.
Tucker, is that what you're
Yes.
referring to? So if we go to page 39, all these projects, the total project dollars and thousands is listed in the first numerical column. So if we do look at the middle school project, which is the 4th from the bottom row being the total, the 4th from the bottom being PCPS Middle School, that's a project value of $35,327,000. So that's what that would mean in thousands. Proffers and grants, we have a $751,000 in contributions to this project from proffers or grants. I imagine, though I don't know for sure, Charlotte can correct me, that this is mostly from developer proffers. Then in the next column, the general fund is contributing $715,000, so that's not financed, but from the general fund. And then we have bond proceeds as the primary source of revenue to fund the project at a total of $33,861,000. So that's the kind of high-level explanation of what these columns mean, and we can apply those rules generally to all the rest of the projects.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I think for those within the public, we did talk to the schools last week when we were touring. They tell us it's on budget, which is very important, and on time, which is also very important. Both their projects are, that they're managing, the school, the joint transportation facility and the school are on budget and both on time to be completed. So if you see page 43 has the water tower project, and if you note that the bids came in and saved us about $750,000 from what we had held as a placeholder. So those are things our staff is tracking for us, and the key is to make sure we don't overspend anything unless it's absolutely necessary. And I do know Ramona drives a hard bargain, so we certainly appreciate that. Any other questions? For those in the public, if you follow, further pages actually show you what the spending, how much spending is being done and who the money's been paid to. So I think trying to make sure everyone has transparency here and understands exactly where their tax dollars are going. Thanks for the question, Mr. Tucker. And we'll now move on to item 9, excuse me, well, actually,
10A?
probably can go on to 10A right now. Charlotte, you going to take this one? Thank you. This is found on page 53 of our packets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tonight is our annual update on our pre-audit financials. Usually always comes in September. This is the financials that have gone to the auditors for the year, for fiscal year 2017, with all of our accruals added. So on page 54, there's a summary of fund balances pre-audit. And our fund balance, which we roll our Powhatan-Goochland Community Action Agency Fund and the PEG Fund into it, is projected at $16.2 million, which is an increase of $1.3 million from fiscal year 16. The highlights of those as to what impacted that increase over what we conservatively discussed during the budget period has to do with the real estate taxes increase. Again, our delinquent taxes, we've been doing a very good job of, or I should say the Treasurer's Office is doing a very good job of getting those collected for our older year taxes, which we discussed during the budget process, and increase that budget to more capture where the trends have been. Also, our personal property continues to trend up, which is people are buying more vehicles and holding on to some, and I think the proration as well as capturing those vehicles as soon as they are purchased also helps with increase in that revenue flow. I've highlighted in the details some areas of where the biggest increases are and impacts on that. We did have some increase in the court fines this year. That continues to grow as well. The other factor for the increase in the fund balance was the transfers to social services, CSA, and the school board. As you know, with CSA, we do our best estimations based on 3-year trends of what those cases are going to cost us, and we were able to save $66,000 of what we thought we may end up having to, our match might have been for those cases. And social services as well, around $103,000, I believe, is what we saved in the transfer. The schools was the biggest. They were able to save, and I guess essentially we transferred less by $454,000, which, based on the policy have with them, has been added to their capital maintenance reserve for any long-term construction or emergency type needs, which you will see on, I hate to keep flipping back, on that initial page 54, we reserve that out for them. So their new capital maintenance reserve is $793,093.
Charlotte, can we pause there?
Yes, sir.
So just for those of you in the audience or listening, we as a board decided to allow any monies that were saved to be moved in a capital maintenance reserve fund for the schools. Previously, there seemed to be a trend that schools spend all the money they could because, A, there was no incentive to save. So therefore, we said, if you can save, we will put that in a capital maintenance reserve fund so that you can use them for repairs rather than come to us, as they had in previously years past, and ask for $40,000 or $50,000 to fix an erosion or an air conditioning problem. So we create that fund, and what's happened over the last several years is they've taken and saved money so that they can use them for capital maintenance needs that are basically determined during the year. And I applaud them for doing that rather than kind of spend to the last dollar, because they had to return it to us anyway. So,
Right.
thank you.
That's a good point. So also what I want to point out, we always every year come to you with carry forwards, which is part of the summary on page 54. But if you go back to page 68 of your packet, this is the request for carry forward. And we tried to break it down based on things that were previously budgeted that are still in process, such as tuition reimbursement. The board put in $25,000 in fiscal year 17 to encourage employees to seek education, additional education that would benefit their jobs. And so we're asking for the remainder that wasn't spent. There is a cap on what can be spent each year per employee, and this is the remainder we're asking to carry that forward. There's matching funds for the fire and EMS grants to help out our volunteer organizations when they seek a grant to pay for things. And then the clerk's audit, due to the delay in the audit, we're requesting that her budget be, which is not due to her, it's due to the state's delay in scheduling her audit. We're asking that her funds be carried forward, because when it's an audit on more years, it typically costs more than what we put in the audit. There is an E911 maintenance service contract that needs to be put in for the budget for 18. And then the others are all other identified needs. And some of those Mr. Voorhees has spoke on is some strategic planning, some organizational development to go along with some strategic action plan, the BRP, and the performance-based budgeting, so we can get started on that. I can go through each one of these if you'd like, or we can just keep moving along. So those are some needs that I will bring these back in the October meeting for actual appropriation in a resolution. So if you have any questions on those, please feel free to ask. And then the last is the capital maintenance. Well, I'll discuss. We have in here, I calculate the capital maintenance reserve every year based on the Board of Supervisors policy, which is, our policy is to always maintain 15% of fund balance as unassigned. So the calculation on page 67 has that our current fund balance is actually 20.7% of operating revenues of the fiscal year 17. Then we take out any non-spendables, which is the Community Action Agency Fund, the PEG Fund, and any prepaid expenses. our request for carry forwards, and then the school's capital maintenance reserve, which gives us what we're gonna put aside for our capital needs. It was $3.1 million, which 1.6 has already been identified through the fiscal year 17 capital improvement program and appropriated at this time. So I stand ready to answer any other questions you might have.
And I would just make sure we emphasize the point that this is informational. We are not asking for a board decision on anything. This is informational, so if you have any questions about any of this, the board certainly can present those to us this evening. We will follow up, or individual board members can contact us over the next several weeks. Our intent is to give you this information in advance, and then we would appropriate the carry forwards at the next meeting.
Correct.
So, what, Ted, so we have an audit committee consisting of 2 school board members and 2 board of supervisors members and an at-large citizen who will be meeting. When will that meeting take place?
The audit is scheduled for October the 2nd, so that week will be the audit, and then we typically, I've scheduled it for December the 13th so that I have time to write the report and everything, but it will go to the audit committee with the auditors there to discuss the process, any findings, and the actual report on that date.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Charlotte, on page 69,
Yes, sir.
5th and 6th lines from the bottom of the page. What does the word unbudgeting mean?
Oh, that was the, I don't know if you remember back when we ended up, originally, we had budgeted, appropriated money for the ladder truck, but we
Right.
were able to take the $250 proffer from Walmart and apply it to the ladder truck. So then we were able to, when we unbudgeted it, we're adding the money back to capital
I
maintenance
got it.
reserve.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we write that with disappearing ink? Just wondering. I have a question, Mr. Ashley.
Go ahead.
Kind of a prompt. Charlotte's done a really, really good job in directing our finances, and I met with her and Mr. Voorhees to talk about possible ways of doing future budgets and just kicking around some ideas, and I quickly learned it's a lot harder and a lot more complicated, and a lot more expensive than I first thought to make a change in the way that you do budgeting. But I will say, I'm a fan of performance-based budgeting. And could you tell the people of Powhatan just very quickly what performance-based budgeting is and how it differs from straight line item budgeting?
It's more of a condensed budget, and it's based more on performance measures by department. I'm still learning quite a lot more about that because it's not traditionally been done here. Mr. Voorhees probably can speak even better about it.
That's fine. Ted, if you want to kick in.
Because,
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to do that. So essentially, traditional budgeting at the local government level has often been referred to as incremental budgeting or line item type budgeting. So, you have a department that maybe has a line item for office supplies, and maybe it's $100. And so then departments are asked to prepare their budget for the next year. So they come in and they say, oh, well, there was inflation, so maybe this year we want $102 for office supplies. That's a 2% increase. And so you kind of multiply that across the entire local government, and you'd end up with sort of a 2% increase across the board. And so I think performance budgeting asks the question, is that the best way to do it? Surely there are cases where you do need to have an inflation-type based increase. Energy is often one that comes to mind. Fuel goes up, and you do need to budget for that. But a performance budget would be more tied to accomplishing specific goals. So if the board said, for example, we would like to, and I'll just kind of make this up, we'll talk about parks and recreation. That's always a fun subject, so we'll talk about that. We have a certain number of fields, and we want to make sure that we make those fields accessible to the public at a certain level. So let's say that each field could be available to the public 10 hours a day. So we're making that up. And the public comes to us and they say, well, we need more fields. So we'll analyze that 10 hours a day times all our fields, times the staff time that it takes to maintain them. And then we do the math and come up with the demand from the public is that we really need to make our fields available 12 hours a day in order to meet the needs. So that would drive our operating budget. It might drive our capital budget. So you prepare your budget to meet objectives. So while that might not have been the easiest example to give, I think you get the idea that it's not just adding to a line item, but to an outcome. And so what we would do for all of our services is we would ask that a performance measurement be derived for every service. So it could be sheriff's patrol, it could be fire suppression, it could be parks, fields, it could be building permits, all those sorts of things. And so you would try to have a workload indicator. So how many building permits can we issue per day? You would try to have an efficiency indicator, how many permits per employee, for example. And you would try to have an effectiveness indicator. So, how many permits were issued that were accurate, or how many inspections were completed with 100% or 99% accuracy. So you work across all your functions, and then you start holding yourselves accountable around performance rather than just incrementally increasing the budget based on inflation in the dollars. And so then ultimately the board could say, instead of we want to increase the office supply budget 2%, you would say we want to increase service in this area by this amount. And then you can really see it in the budget. You can say, oh, look, that program, building inspections, has an increase of X and it has a performance target of Y, as opposed to just looking at the document and saying, oh, look, the office supply line went up. What did I get for that?
Right.
Right? So I know that's a little bit long-winded and maybe it's a little wonkish, but that's the trend, is to move in this direction so that citizens and elected leaders can look at your budget document and see what we're trying to accomplish and really understand the outcomes are more important than the inputs. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'd just like to point out also it not only gives you an idea of what your return on investment is, which is really, that makes us responsible with taxpayer money, but for my colleagues, it allows you to make priorities much more easily, because instead of looking at pages and pages of tables and nothing but numbers, you're actually having to decide, okay, we want those athletic fields, but we also want these, the sheriff to be able to perform at this level and whatever, and we can't do it all. So that forces you to prioritize based on what parts of the county do you want to make sure perform at a certain level, and which ones, well, we're gonna have to wait a year or two for that, et cetera. So it jumps off the page at you when you're doing performance-based budgeting. Anyway, I didn't mean to take up too much time, but, and you kind of ooch into this. You can't just flip from one type to the other in a year. So I appreciate your openness to consider taking some of that on board. Thanks.
One of the bigger challenges initially to go down this path is instead of just having each department's budget, that accumulation of line items, the office supplies, the operating dollars, the payroll, the furniture, whatever, you'll have to recode the budget so that every department will probably have multiple programs, and so that you'll be looking at effectiveness and accomplishment of goals by program instead of just by department. And then that way you can, within those programs, really move around and make those priority decisions.
I think what I like most about this kind of budgeting is the fact that you can take our intent from our strategic objectives, make it flow down through the comp plan, into your accountability so we can measure you. And you can hold your directors accountable for clear line of sight between what it is that they're asked to do and what their performance is. And oh, by the way, that's also an accountability for us'uns from the public's point of view, because they can look at what we said we wanted to do, how effective we wanted to be, what kind of delivery we wanted to have, and measure it against the number at the end of some time period to say, yeah, they made it or didn't make it. So it's all about accountability to me.
I have no comments, other than to say this is something we've been working, Mr. Williams and all of us have been talking about this for a while. We know it's going to take some implementation time. I have done performance-based budgeting in business for years, so I'm looking forward to the change and the implementation of it all. Thank you. Any other questions of Charla? I'll just say the numbers, from expenditures. I looked at all the departments, really looked really nice. Nobody seemed to overspend their budget this year, which was nice. So that's fantastic. And look for more data as the audit moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll now move on to, we have time certain items. We'll go back to 10B and C after we finish our appreciations and resolutions. The first proclamation we have is commending Louis A. Urbine Jr. for exemplary service and dedication to Powhatan County. It's found on page 79, and Mr. Norvik's going to take this for us. With the family, there they are.
Irvine family, come on
The
down.
Urbine families, there they are right there, sitting up front and center.
This is a privilege. It is definitely my privilege to be reading this.
Please.
Proclamation commending Louis A. Urbine Jr. for exemplary service and dedication to Powhatan County. Whereas Louis Urbine was a charter member of the Huguenot Volunteer Fire Department since its founding in 1970, and whereas Louis Urbine provided unparalleled mechanical knowledge to other volunteers, and whereas Louis Urbine painted, repaired, and maintained the original Huguenot fire engines, and whereas Louis Urbine procured supplies to help build the original Huguenot firehouse for less than $6,000, and whereas Louis Urbine mentored 2 generations of firefighters, and whereas Louis Urbine was a well-known member of the community, and whereas Louis Urbine provided over 40 years of volunteer service to the citizens of Powhatan County. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Powhatan County Board of Supervisors commends the exemplary service and dedication of Louis Urbine Jr. and extends on behalf of the citizens of Powhatan County appreciation for his long history of volunteer service in the county. And I make this in the form of a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second that.
We have a motion in several seconds. All in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
And
Any
may
comments? I do have a couple comments before you present, and please, the Urbines, I want you to please stand.
You want to come up?
Many of you know I owned a business in the county for many years, and when I first came and bought the business and opened the grocery store, Mr. Urbine was one of the first people who came up and introduced himself. His son had worked for me at U-Crops for many years, and as we all know, sometimes our kids are a direct reflection upon us, and Mr. Urbine was a wonderful man, and his son continues to carry that name on very well. So we certainly thank the Urbine family for all you've done for this county, and we hope that continues for many years. Thank you. Any other comments, Mr.
Mr.
Davis?
Chairman,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Carson.
Did you get a picture?
Brett's going to take it.
Thank you, thank you.
Because Laura McFarland's not here.
Hey, Larry, turn his face so they can get a decent picture there. Thank you. We don't want your backside.
Look at Brett.
Perfect.
On behalf of the Urbine family, I would like to thank y'all. There was 8 Urbines in the fire department present, and there's not all of them there today. And we've been in this county for 138 years. And we feel like we have helped some things in this county.
Y'all have.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Larson, you have anything? Go ahead.
Louis,
Lewis, Ms. Urbine?
you probably don't remember this, but do you remember where you were on the night of Sandy? No, him. Do you remember where you were on the night that Sandy came through?
Well, I was probably over River Trail.
You were. You were up, it was raining, cats and dogs.
Going down,
I couldn't get home.
poison oak everywhere.
Poison oak everywhere, and you were up to your knees in poison oak and sawdust from the chainsaws going in the weather. I still wouldn't have got home without you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Chuck? Chuck, remember I asked you before the meeting, I said, how old are you?
I'm 83.
That's amazing. Now, Chuck, just a couple of years ago, I come home and there in my driveway was a vehicle that had slammed into the tree at high speed. They were cutting him out. And who was there? It was Chuck. So I told Chuck I want some of his blood. Also, and I told you before the meeting, Chuck, Wayne Holland still considers you a rookie compared to his service.
He's got more years.
He's got
I've
more.
got more age.
I'll be sure to share that with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Urbine. Thank you for your husband's service, and we would certainly appreciate it. Thank you. Larry, you're going to take the proclamation recognizing National Fire Prevention Week and members of the Powhatan County Fire and Rescue.
Here we go. Indeed, a proclamation recognizing National Fire Prevention Week and the members of Powhatan County Fire and Rescue. Whereas the County of Powhatan is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Powhatan, and whereas home fires in the Commonwealth of Virginia resulted in 69 civilian deaths in 2016, and whereas newer homes are built with lightweight materials that burn faster than older home constructions, and whereas many of today's products and furnishings produce toxic gases and smoke when burned, making it impossible to see and breathe within moments, and whereas these conditions contribute to a much smaller window of time for people to escape a home fire safely, with people having as little as 1 to 2 minutes to escape from the time the smoke alarm sounds, and whereas a home fire escape plan includes 2 exits from every room in the house, a path to the outside from each exit, smoke alarms in all required locations, and a meeting place outside where everyone in the home will meet upon exiting, and whereas practicing a home fire escape plan twice a year ensures that everyone in the household knows what to do in a real fire situation, and whereas Powhatan's first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education, and whereas the 2017 Fire Prevention Week theme, Every Second Counts, Plan 2 Ways Out, effectively serves to educate the public about the vital importance of developing a home fire escape plan with all members of the household and practicing it twice a year. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan County that the week of October 8 through 14 is Fire Prevention Week throughout Powhatan County. We urge all the people of Powhatan to develop a home fire escape plan with all members of the household and practice it twice a year, and join us in honoring the volunteer and career men and women of the Powhatan County Fire and Rescue Department, whose diligence and professionalism keep our county and citizens safe. And I make this in the form of a motion to be adopted by the Board of Supervisors.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of the motion as presented? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Chief, or who's going to accept this? You want to bring a big group down? Please, if you're here from the fire department, please stand at least so we all can, I know it's many of you sit in the audience.
I'm going to hand this to you, but I know that there's an awful lot of people that I would like to just hand everybody here one personally, but
Thank you, Larry. We'll now move on to the next 11C, swearing in full-time firefighter EMTs of the Powhatan County Fire and Rescue Department. I think Mr. Norvig and Chief Singer are going to take this.
I'll go first, I guess, and then I'll go back up there, I promise.
I just want to say one thing about the fire drills. My family practiced fire drills. I have 3 kids, and we talked about meeting in the mailbox and how to get out of the house and everything. So they were set a few years ago on what to do in case there was a fire in our house. And we had an earthquake. And my boys look at me like, what do we do, Dad? What do we do? I don't know. We didn't practice that. All right, I'm moving on. Oath of office for firefighters. This is another privilege tonight. We are here for a swearing-in ceremony for firefighters, one of the world's most honored but dangerous occupations. When there is an emergency in the community, firefighters are one of the first on the scene. Firefighters are there at devastating ravages of fire, medical emergencies, motor vehicle accidents, hazardous material incidents, rescue operations, natural disasters, and many other critical incidents. Firefighters are civil servants, and as sworn officials, follow standard policies and procedures of the Fire and Rescue Department. They are there to prevent human suffering and death, to stabilize the incident, and prevent further injury, damage, or loss of property. It is a great honor to have this opportunity to present these badges of office to the founding members of the Powhatan County Fire and Rescue Department.
So I'm going to call the firefighters down one by one, and what we have is the firefighters' badges have been numbered. So our very first firefighter is John Hunter Martin. Would you come on down? And bring your significant other. You have somebody to pin it on? Bring somebody to pin it on for you. Real hard. Draw blood. Okay.
Please stay in there.
Yeah.
Please stay up front. We'd like to get a group picture.
Do we get a picture? We got lots of pictures.
Oh, it's too shiny.
I don't know if you just wait a second. We'll get just one in. Next, we have firefighter EMT Ryan Houtsma. Step up here and get the picture taken.
Come on up, Mom.
All right, did everybody get a picture?
Hold on, you need, did you get your picture?
She's got, go on in there, Mom. Come on here.
It's, yeah,
Birthed him.
it's all in the family, you know it is. Okay. Firefighter EMT Leighton Dean. Get your picture taken. Turn and smile, everybody. Firefighter paramedic Jeff Wallace.
At least you stick them, they're EMTs, so we could take care of them medically.
Oh, he's a paramedic, so.
Oh.
Oh, did you get pictures? Did you get pictures? Oh, no. We gotta go. Oh, she's gotta go. She's gotta go to work. I'm sorry. She's gotta go to work. Bye. Firefighter EMT Michael Sowers. Yep. Firefighter EMT Christine Keenan. Let's get magnetic ones next time.
He's sweating. Picture.
Okay, we have Renee Holy, the deputy clerk of the court. She's going to swear you. You just want to come up here. Don't hide back there.
So in case you didn't hear, it's Ms. Holey from the clerk's office who's going to swear him in. Thank you for coming.
All right, if you can raise your right hands and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the Commonwealth of Virginia against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as firefighter EMT of the Powhatan County Fire and Rescue Department. I swear to protect, to safeguard, and preserve life, health, and property against fire and other perils, and to maintain a proficiency in fire suppression and emergency medical services to the best of my skills and abilities. So help me God. Thank you. Congratulations.
Chief, thank you for that. And for those of you in the audience, this is an exciting time for Powhatan County as we swear in our full-time firefighters. But I see in the audience a lot of our volunteers. And the meshing of the duties between the volunteers and the full-time firefighters is a very important transition that will take place. We can never, never, never dismiss the volunteer hours that our volunteers do in implementing the paid fire staff, and this is very important as we continue to take care of the citizen needs, and y'all understand that better than we as board members do. So thank you for all of that, all of you do to take care of our citizens. Thank you.
And then just for the board's information, we're having a small reception downstairs, so even after your closed session, if you want to come downstairs, we might still be there.
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Larry. We'll now move on thank you all for all who've come tonight. But we'll now move back to item 10B, which is an update more on Powhatan County Fire and Rescue recruitment and retention efforts.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Sadler has an announcement he would like to make.
Someone brought some funds up here on these couple rows.
Larry, stay up here.
That actually is mine. Yes, it is.
Get them out, get them out, push them out.
I do not want you to hand a politician money on the dais.
It's on camera.
Just, okay, stay away.
Go ahead.
It really is mine.
Thank you, Adam, for being so honest. Please, by all means, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sposa. I am the Volunteer Recruitment and Retention Coordinator for the Powhatan County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Department. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present tonight a brief overview on our recruitment and retention program and a status update. I do have a presentation that's only 5 slides long. I won't kill you with death by PowerPoint, so this will go very well. So again, thank you for the opportunity. So a little on the background of the program, we started the recruitment and retention position and activities was based on a FEMA grant that actually went into effect in January of this year, 2017. And we did a lot of background work trying to prepare for a July 1st kickoff of our recruiting efforts. And that meant some networking, some preparations, some compilation of some photographs of our volunteer partners to make sure that we had a representation on some banners and flyers that we had published. So there was some background work with that, and July 1st, our recruiting effort began with a relationship building sessions and coming to some of the meetings with our volunteer partners, which was very rewarding, and I enjoyed the opportunity very much to meet the volunteer contingency of Powhatan County. We also partnered with Summit Media through competitive bids on advertising through K95 Radio, which is the #1 outlet for the area. We also have some social media outlets, Facebook, that's actually been quite effective. We have a recruiting website that's new to the program, again, based on some Summit Media development that is separate from the Powhatan County website, but we do have linkage with our recruitment website with the Powhatan County website. And then we do have banners and flyers that were printed in production and are distributed at public events such as the parades and some fundraising events that we've had most recently. So the results of that pre-work and the presentation and the development of the banners so far that I've got some data that's being collected for some accurate representation of how effective the monies that we're spending are used on the media programs, the radio programs and such. So I don't have all of the demographics of those available ready, but I can tell you that we do have some direct links from radio contact just for the conversations that we've had. Folks have heard the radio advertisement, called into the department, gotten applications, and are filling those out. So that's proven to be effective, at least on those 2 counts. But we will have better metrics on those once the data is being compiled through the website and the application itself. We're moving to an all-online streamlined process so that the applications are processed quicker to get them to the hands of our volunteer partners for processing and membership involvement and for ultimately service to the community. Since a July 1 kickoff, we've had 23 applicants, and that was as of last week when this was presented. I've actually had 2, maybe 3 more come in since then, so this is not 100% accurate, which is good news for us. But in regards to the intent of the grant that we've received from FEMA to increase our numbers of what we call an IDLH environment firefighter, which is immediately dangerous to life and health. 61% of the applications that we received have gone directly towards these positions that we're trying to get established and into the system to provide services to the county, which is remarkable for only having basically 3 months into the program. Overall, our grant was looking to have 40 IDLH environment-capable firefighters over the course of the 4-year grant period. So to have this many applications and a large percentage of them being able to fulfill that position very shortly, it's quite remarkable, and I'm excited to where the grant and the program could go. The remaining applicants that we've found have been for EMS positions providing medical care, which is an important component and a large majority of the call volume in the county and in surrounding jurisdictions as well, or auxiliary memberships, which in the background of these volunteer agencies are very important positions to keep their fund drives, some of their equipment or building maintenances, all of those types of things that work into the background, especially serving on large incidents, the auxiliaries actually would come out and try to provide refreshments of those things. So another very important part of the components of our volunteer partners. So some of the results that we've been looking at so far is that from our social media advertisements, I get information back and have access to the marketing and program and research that we've done. 149,000 people have been affected by the recruitment efforts on our social media. And what that means is when you pull up a Facebook page, there's an advertisement off to the right, and at least 149,000 people have been able to see that ad. It goes a little bit farther to say, of that 149,000, 639 have gone to our recruiting website from Facebook, which is another remarkable number. And even larger to that, a 0.43% return means, according to our website and social media managers, that's a very good percentage of people who have actually gone to the recruiting website, who've looked at our volunteer partners and their capabilities and spent time on the recruiting webpage getting information and hopefully contemplating application to membership. Since the implementation of the program in July, I've been able to attend several fundraising events, several large community events where we've had our flyers, banners, and good conversation with the community in effect. And actually have received 2 applicants from that direct contact. So again, the program seems to be moving in a good direction, and I'm looking forward to the numbers that we can have over the next 3.5 years or so. The program is not specifically limited to our IDLH firefighters, for lack of a better phrasing for our volunteer partners, but we do have our volunteer rescue squad and our JET program that's also benefiting through the recruitment and retention efforts to build a foundation of our younger generation that will come up and hopefully stay within the organization at some level for a number of years. So we're very proud of that fact and be able to help that program out. Our next phases of the program do include retention efforts. So we've had some feedback from the stations already, giving us idea of what is valued as a volunteer to, I guess, reward for the commitment that we provided, and we're very thankful for those things. We want to make sure that we have a way to show our appreciation for the time and service commitment that you've done, which is, again, on a completely voluntary basis. Very shortly, we'll be meeting with company representation to finalize a plan to implement our retention efforts. The next part of the phase is personnel development, and what that means is providing the proper courses and our proper training for new members to come into the station and to continue the education of current members so that they're more capable of providing emergency responses. And then the last phase is this program monitoring, and that's to continue the efforts of recruitment and retention through our social media and websites and continue to look at those demographics to make sure that we're getting the most efficient program for the monies that we're spending for it. So overall, I thank you again for the opportunity to present. We've got a good program. We've had good results with it, and we're looking forward to being able to serve with our volunteer partners over the next course.
Any questions of Joe? Just one comment. Thank you, Joe. Very, very detailed. I liked page 77, the next phases. That's one of the things that I was, as chief and I talked about this, was, retention efforts and the rewards efforts, and because of, again, the time volunteered is away from their families and all those things. So
Yes, sir.
thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing about those efforts. And I did hear the ad on K95, so it was very well done.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Joe and Chief, I hope you understand that if anything that any one of us on the board can do, or we in aggregate can do to help in the recruiting effort, all you got to do is ask. Ask any one of us, or ask us as a board. If you need us to show up, if you need us to make presentations, if you need us to do an award ceremony, anything that we can do to help your efforts, we're all in this together.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Okay, we'll now move on to item 10C. And Brad, are you going to make any presentation, or you want me to handle this? Ken? So basically, this is the resolution we added, R 2017-68, state road acceptance for Ashton Section 2. If you see in the summary item that the developers request VDOT has inspected and approved the street, so they've done all their work. It just, Dominion Virginia Power is requesting that the road be in an acceptance state system before they will extend power to the system, which is kind of baffling to me. So, you know, that's why we have it on our agenda and add it to the agenda tonight to get it done so they can move on with their next step. So,
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
move that we approve Resolution R 2017-68 as
Second.
presented.
a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion as presented? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay. I think that clears all the agenda except for their next, their time certain public hearings. So the first public hearing we're going to have is a public hearing on ordinance 2017-26. It's case number 1703AZ. And Brad, I think you're going to take this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. Brett Chardine, Director of Community Development. This zoning ordinance text amendment would propose to add microdistillery to a variety of districts. Currently, microdistillery is allowed by right in the I-1 and I-2 industrial districts, as well as by conditional use permit in the A-10 zoning district. This is the same way that we permit distillery as well. So the ordinance defines distillery and microdistillery, distillery being a larger scale, larger operation. Most of that's going to be wholesale sent out. Microdistillery is production of less than 5,000 gallons per year, can include a restaurant or a public tasting room. So again, smaller batch, smaller scale type operation. So staff believes that because of the smaller scale of this, it would make sense to consider expanding it to some other districts where appropriate. So the Planning Commission, they reviewed it. Staff also talked to localities that have microdistilleries currently operating in them, just to get an idea of what kind of impacts they're seeing. All that we spoke to said they were good economic generators, had no issues with zoning, noise, pollution, any of those issues. So the Planning Commission, in reviewing it, recommended adding it to the VC Village Center District by right, also by right to the VC PD Village Center Plan Development District. The VR Village Residential District is a conditional use. The Village Residential Plan Development, VRPD, is a by right use. Commerce Center CC is a by right use. Commerce Center Plan Development, CCPD, is a by right use. And the Crossroads CR District as a conditional use. Staff's original recommendation to the Planning Commission also included it in some transition districts, including C General Commercial. The Planning Commission's recommendation was to include it in the districts I'd just stated, with the exception of that C General Commercial District. Staff concurs with the Planning Commission recommendation, but also has no concern if the board sees fit to include C General Commercial as a by right use there as well.
Any questions of staff at this time?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr.
So the way this is written, this is for, you say, wholesale. So there's no food involved, and there's no parking problems because there won't be a whole lot of
So
clients, is the right word.
So the regular distillery, that one would be more likely purely wholesale. This microdistillery, being smaller, could be purely wholesale, but the use description definition does include restaurant or public tasting room as an accessory use. So that couldn't be the primary use. That could be a smaller component, serving some food or snacks along with tastes of different products.
I see these very similar to, I see the microbreweries that are going on there. I call them boutique distilleries. I'm fine with a large distillery being an I-2 and I, but these are, to me, a boutique type of distillery, very similar to the breweries. If you ride up Route 151 off of 250 towards Wintergreen, you'll see distilleries on that road. They also have microbreweries, and I can tell you they put a lot of tremendous amount of tourism in those counties that they're there. So it's a little different than a traditional distillery that you see that, cranking out box upon boxes upon boxes of product that doesn't taste very good. And so, that's the type of distillery I think that we're looking at here.
Yeah, and some of those accessory uses, so if somebody came in and wanted to do it and wanted to include the restaurant component, then we're going to look at additional parking for that. We'll look at what percentage, what square footage that building's dedicated to that use and how many parking spaces are required per the ordinance. Sometimes you'll see with these type of things, breweries especially, is maybe having some kind of an event. So if they did that, might permit it through a temporary event permit, so we'd be looking at how many people they're expecting, if the site can accommodate that parking or what they've put in place. So those are all things that, if for accessory uses, we'd be looking at as part of our review.
So Brett, one of the things that in VC, this type of operation would be, you basically, if you allowed it in, as it says, permitted based upon planning commission recommendation, it would be a non-conforming use, would it not?
So this ordinance, is just general, not tied to any specific application, but what brought it to light that microdistillery isn't allowed in a lot of districts where it might be logical was we do have somebody interested in opening one in the county in a specific location. So yes, that building, it's an existing building. If they were to, for example, zone to VC, the building wouldn't meet those setbacks anyway, so it would be non-conforming in that regard.
So in the future, one could, but in the application case, okay.
Sure.
And so the commission was okay with Crossroads as a conditional use?
Correct.
But did not want to include it in C?
Correct. And the discussion they had with the C was, I don't recall specific conversation about C itself, but more RC, the transition districts that C is included in. So it was more, I think their concern with transition districts was tied with the RC, not, again, a whole lot of direct conversation about C commercial, but it was kind of lumped into that.
Okay. Any other questions of staff?
I just have a question for clarification, I guess. What's the difference between a micro distillery that's not serving little hors d'oeuvres and does not have a tasting room and an ABC store? And do they need some kind of special permit that, is going to become sort of a ball of fur? Because I know the Commonwealth of Virginia is pretty strict on that, where you can't just go selling booze out of a warehouse. You have to have certain licensure for that. So where are we on that, Brett?
Yeah, so liquor store would be a separate use that's already in the ordinance and permitted in a variety of places. Microdistillery requires, by the definition, that it's blending, distilling there on site. So you couldn't go under this use and then just sell, over the counter or ABC store type products, which are state regulated anyways. My understanding is the way these work when you open your own distillery is you do get an ABC license, of course. They label, inspect the product, and then sell them on site, but it's not a ABC store where you just, again, generally sell a whole variety of products that you aren't producing yourself. So
Do they have to have a tasting room or light restaurant fare?
No, you wouldn't have to. Those are accessory uses. You could just distill, create the product, bottle it, and sell it on site. You wouldn't necessarily have to do tasting or food sales.
Thank you.
They used to do a lot of that in this county many years ago. Probably out in the back of Mr. Williams's property. So.
They did. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Tucker, I'm
Tell me
sorry.
again which one of the districts the planning commission recommended not to allow this. Was it VC?
C.
C, general commercial.
C, and tell me again what the reason was, because of. Why did they recommend no for C?
So C, RC, RU, O office, and the courthouse districts are all what's known as transition districts. So
Yeah.
they're older zoning classifications that we have lots of properties that have that classification, but we don't zone new properties to them. So again, it was a higher level discussion about not adding uses to those districts, not necessarily the pros and cons of C, general commercial by itself. So
Do you see a problem?
I do not. I would concur with the planning commission in probably not including it in RC. There's a lot of undeveloped property in RC where C, general commercial, more often we're looking at an existing building. Putting it in here as a by right use would allow some of those to be repurposed, reused, without having to go through a full rezoning. And again, in some of these instances, rezoning to one of the newer classifications, it would be non-compliant because of setbacks or other issues anyways.
So you're okay, and the planning commission's okay with the way you have it written here and what we have in front of us?
The planning commission did not recommend C, general commercial. Staff does not have a concern with that if you chose to
see
add
the
it.
chart, I think the chart's on page 89 that Brett articulated to us, so. Any other questions of staff before we are going to have a public hearing on this? And we can bring it back up after the public hearing, or we can ask questions now.
One more, just administrative, simple. We're about to revise the comp plan, and so some of these, VC or C or whatever, may change, designation may change location. Are we going to have to revisit this in a few months anyway?
I don't think so. In looking at these VC, VR, CC, with the exception of Winterfield, we don't really have anything zoned that yet. So in the comp plan, we're looking at the appropriateness of those districts and in turn, adding those uses to this. So we don't have with these districts any existing development where we really need to think about that. That people are going to have to come in for a rezoning to get to these regardless, so.
Joe?
Thanks, Brett.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Williams.
Brett, what's the principal difference between a microbrewery and a micro distillery? Is it the alcohol volume? Is that it?
Yeah, it would be the type of product. So one would be, beer
One
that
would
would
be
have a
high
lower.
volume of alcohol.
Yep, exactly.
But other than that, what's the difference?
Yep. Otherwise, very similar establishments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. So, Brett, thank you. The applicant, typically we allow, well, this is really not an app, we have no application, never mind. Okay, we'll open the public hearing on ordinance 2017-26. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward at this time.
Good evening, I'm Michael Potter, 3875 Old Buckingham Road. And I just wanted to speak in favor of the micro distillery falling into these classes that were just reviewed. As we all know, and as stated earlier, Powhatan County has been in the business of whiskey for many years, before the years of zoning. And a good water source and good outdoor cover and a fast car was all that was needed at that time. Today, this industry has changed from large manufacturing warehouses to more of the boutique spaces that you spoke of, Mr. Melton, full of personality that draws a person to visit a community, taste the spirits, and purchase the spirits. And then our wish is for them to go home and tell a friend, and it renews itself over and over again. I commend your staff for their proactive approach and research and understanding the need for the zoning change as this industry has changed. And we are fortunate enough to have a proprietor that would be interested in using some space that we have coming up here in the Courthouse Village. And his name is John Davenport, and he's here if you have any questions in terms of Mr. Norvig, like you asked, in terms of ABC laws and stuff. He's done quite an extensive amount of homework. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward at this time.
Betty Handy, 3171 Judes Ferry Road. I'm certainly not opposed to the generation of alcohol in Powhatan County by any means, but I would urge you to continue it as a conditional use. I know we have water lines that you all want to hook people up to, but Powhatan County does not have an endless supply of water, and I think you better think about that. Also, I think the neighbors of these microbreweries should have an opportunity to, micro distilleries should have an opportunity to want them next door to where they are now. I'd probably be Mr. Potter's first customer, but I think that it would be well to leave it on a conditional use basis. And Silverback is a great place. I have been there, so.
Thank you, Ms. Handy. I too. Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward at this time.
I don't have a preference either way.
Please give me your name, address,
Bill
your name.
Bryan, 6459 Anderson Highway.
And when you finish, you can sign in too. Ms. Handy, would you please sign in also?
Oh, boy, we're getting legalistic.
Well, just so we have it, we misspelled somebody's name one time, they got quite upset, so.
Anyway, I know a little bit about the ABC laws. They change constantly, but I will advise you of this. If they are going to sell the alcohol on premise, they're pretty much so going to have the restaurant to go along with it unless that has changed. Has that changed? Huh?
It has changed.
It has changed. So you can sell to the public without selling a certain amount of food.
Hold on, excuse me. Well, if you want to come speak at the mic, we'll allow that to
All
take
right,
place.
Mr. Milton, all right. Anyway, most of
Thank
the
you.
places that do it, and I've been connected to this with business, also down the line will ask for conditional use permits to have functions that go on outside, usually get-togethers or, you know, like small fair where they're gonna have other microbreweries there sampling their stuff and everything like that. You know, the only thing you need to really make sure is wherever they're gonna put the thing, that they've got adequate parking and room, and then they're not gonna intrude on the neighbors with the noise level if the board is gonna consider giving these conditional use permits down the line. But, again, it was my understanding too, back in, when we were doing it, that you also had to apply for a separate permit from the ABC board to have that function. And again, I don't know if that's changed. So I'd like to hear the answers to it, but I'm really not against it or anything like that. I'm just saying you want to be cautious where you put it for the neighbors, for the people of the county. You don't want to create a headache down the road, but there's plenty of them. I guess if somebody wants to be brave and jump in there and spend the money, let them have at it. But anyway, that's the only question I had, was about the ABC end of it, and also the special events. Most of these places are gonna ask for these permits to do these special functions, to have these microbreweries out there along the sample and everything like that down the line, unless things have changed. But I don't drink, so I don't care. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant, for your comments, and we appreciate that. Anyone
I was
else
gonna say,
wishing to
Mr.
speak, please come forward at this time.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear his comments.
Okay. Please introduce yourself and.
My name is John Davenport, 11620 Drysdale Drive, North Chesterfield. We have family here in Powhatan. We ultimately will end up here in Powhatan. We are the family, my wife and my children are here. We are interested in opening the micro distillery here in Powhatan. A couple of the issues that were brought up, the difference between a microbrewery and a micro distillery would be the products produced. A microbrewery would be producing beer or cider. A distillery will be producing spirits such as bourbon, rum, gins, etc. As far as the laws go, we have to abide by both the TTB federal laws. Once we get the permit from the federal government, we then have to apply to the Virginia ABC board to get a Virginia ABC license. And then for the tasting room, we will have to become a de facto ABC store so that we could sell the product on site. But we're only allowed to sell what we produce. We cannot sell any other brands. And I'm happy to take any other questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to comment. My biggest concern was the ABC license and the differences, and you answered that. Go ahead.
So this was a question
Hold on.
for,
Is this a question for the app?
No.
David, do you have a question?
Yes.
Gentlemen? Yes, go ahead, then. Hang tight, Mr. Tucker.
The issue was raised about water usage. How much would you anticipate in terms of thousands of gallons a year of water you would consume to
A produce
year,
I'd have to do them, I'd have to dig out my phone and do annual, but essentially we're producing about 300 gallons of spirit water usage a day, and that would be about 10% in actual spirit production, so about 300 gallons a day. Most of that we will try to recycle as much as possible. Essentially, the dunder from rum is a very good fertilizer, which we have farmers interested in that, and then the wet stillage from producing the grain-based alcohols, bourbons, whiskeys, et cetera. We also have farmers interested in that stillage. So we anticipate very little waste product, but the water usage, again, roughly 300 gallons or so a day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think anyone else has questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question for Brad. if I
Okay,
may.
yeah, we're still having public hearing.
I do too,
Okay, you have one for the staff?
staff.
Okay. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Brett, we've got some questions for you. I'll let Mr. Tucker start, and Mr. Williams can go. I've got a couple also.
Brett, to Mr. Bryant's question about sooner or later, such places usually end up asking for a CUP for parties or get-togethers or whatever. They would have to go through the permitting process to make sure that they have the parking and access to the highway is correct. So it's not automatic that if we agree to a micro distillery, it also agrees to parties and whatever.
No, those would not be a natural extension of it, so those would need to be permitted either, if they're a occasional event, temporary event permit, if they want to, which would probably be uncommon, do it so frequently, then they would need a CUP for an event center. But again, either way, whether it's infrequent or frequent, there's going to be a review process.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let me follow up on Carson's question, because if, for example, you have a restaurant there in conjunction with your micro distillery, what would be the difference in somebody like the Chamber holding a meeting, dinner, event there? I mean, that wouldn't require a special event permit, would it?
No, if it's smaller scale, infrequent, no, we wouldn't. If it was something larger or really regularly recurring, we'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. But something that you described, I would not foresee that needing a special approval if somebody wanted to do something like that.
Going back to the transitional districts, my understanding was from the Planning Commission that they were concerned about populating these districts that were no longer the primary districts in our zoning ordinance. They were there at one time, now they're not being continued, but people have rezoned to those districts previously, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some of them, the board, for example, the
So I'm
RC.
going back and doing things like looking at the comp plan, where you may have had commerce, a rezoning years ago, you wouldn't necessarily want to add permitted uses to that if you were thinking about changing with the changing of the zoning districts and the changing of the comp plan.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, if you want to encourage rezoning rather than using the by right development, then sure, you would not
I
want to
think that
add
was the
uses.
reason. I'm
Yeah.
not speaking for them, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, that was their line of thinking. And again, on the RC, I would concur. I think C is a little different, but yeah, that was in line with their thinking.
Village residential. Village residential, looking at the comp plan, was intended as a transition out from the more intensive village town center. It was to be the residential, and how many units per acre?
I believe 4.
I
Is that
think
the
it's 4.
maximum?
I think
Yeah.
you're correct. It's bobbing his head over here, so we're in agreement. So going to Mrs. Handy's point, wouldn't it be better to have a conditional use permit in that particular district?
Yep, so in VR, it would be by conditional use permit. Where they said by right was VRPD, because they would come in with a master plan. And again, either one of those, we don't have any VR right now, so either of those are going to require a rezoning anyways. So that would be a time for the neighbors to give their input, review the impacts. As staff, I wouldn't have a concern with either one being changed to conditional use. Again, if you're going to have to come in and rezone anyways, you could couple that with a CUP. It's,
So
I think either way.
we're covered with that, going back to the point, giving people a chance to speak, to what's coming in. If you're in residential,
Yep.
if you're in that VR district or in crossroads districts, then the
Correct.
people would have a chance to speak to that conditional use permit.
correct. And
Well-
810 as well requires a conditional use permit.
David, it's office, permitted uses, they suggested office,
Yeah.
village center,
Right.
courthouse square center, light industrial, general commercial, commerce center, village center planned, VCPD basically, village center planned development, and CCPD, which is commerce center planned development.
Right. Yeah, I
And
just
you are
want-
right, Mr. Williams, I think their concern was the whole C.
Yeah. So I'm okay, with the conditional use, for village residential crossroads. I think that gives the control to the community to be able to come and speak, to the conditional use permit that would be applied for. So I'm okay with this, the way it's presented.
So here's my thoughts on it. I understand what the planning commission was working towards. If we want to, as a county, to really start looking at our RC and the uses that we allow, then let's do this. To me, this is like piecemealing something. If we want to look at the uses that are permitted in those, then let's really roll our sleeves up. But let's not hold one industry hostage by allowing the uses, those particular uses. So we would add, my suggestion is we add C to be allowed, but have it be done as a conditional use. I kind of tend to agree with Ms. Handy, not trying to add a step in here, but at least it gets in front of the public. That gives them a chance to speak if they're concerned about, the hours of operation or whatever may be done. They get a chance to speak about it rather than having a permitted use. But I'd say we add C back to this chart, and
As a
then,
conditional use.
as a conditional use, not a permitted use, but a conditional use. That way it gives the citizens an opportunity to come speak if they're concerned about the lighting or the parking or the noise that would come out. And it is a little extra step, but I do think it's fair. So I want to propose that we add C back to this chart.
That would actually give citizens a chance to talk about the water situation as well. because some
300
areas-
gallons is really not going to hurt
That's-
anything, but it's okay, but you're
No, I
right.
understand.
They could talk about, wow, you're using up 300 gallons of water
But
that,
you know, in the southern part of my district, 300 gallons a day it's a lot in Genito West. They have trouble down there getting water out of the ground, so it's a good point.
Well, I was looking at this more from, using our public utilities.
correct.
I wasn't looking at people digging wells to be able to put in a micro
So
distillery.
Brett, I have one other question. So the gentleman
my creek.
spoke of cider. Meaderies are out being done today too. Would this include a meadery? I don't want to have to come back and visit this thing again. Because they are being done in the city of Richmond, they're done in Goochlands, and they're done all over the place. So,
Mead is classified by ABC as wine, actually, if I'm correct. So this would be a different use.
I think we would probably include that with either brewery or winery. So it would, I don't think we would need a separate use for that. Distillery liquor is different enough. I think that one's probably going to slot into one of the other ones. If not, we can certainly look at that and make sure that's covered, make sure there's not a hole in the ordinance there, but.
exactly. Tom, your thoughts, any comments? I know you kind of perked up there, so.
No, I think we'll have to look at that at some, I think, I agree with Brett, it's kind of an ambiguous area, and we'll have to kind of figure out what fits or doesn't fit.
So, Mr. Chairman, may I ask you to summarize what it sounds like we've come to?
So
You're asking for C to be put back in as a conditional use, with everything else to be done as they propose.
as the planning commission proposed, I'm asking that we add C as a conditional use permit to the chart. And that way, if somebody's interested, they can come apply for a conditional use permit and have their meetings, do the process that takes place.
Have you closed the public hearing?
I have closed the public hearing. I'm going to make that in form of a motion.
Second.
Any questions or comment on the motion?
One quick comment, Mr. Williams and I were just saying, as long as the citizens have a chance for input as these situations arise, I'm fine with it.
Again, Larry, back to the chart, I just want everyone to understand. An office, village center, courthouse square center, light industrial, general commercial, commercial center, village center plan unit, and commercial center plan development, village center plan development. It is a permitted use, not requiring any public hearing or anything.
But the C.
Permitted. But the C is requiring, and also CR, which is Crossroads.
Yeah, totally get it.
Conditional use.
And
And that was a
VR.
recommendation from the planning commission. Any other questions or comments?
Question on the floor.
Okay.
Roll call?
You don't
Mr.
need a roll call.
We don't?
We're not voting on the final ordinance. All we're voting on is your motion
The amendment.
to amend what's before us and
Perfect.
to add C as a
Scratch your
conditional
roll
use.
call. All in favor of the motion as presented? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We'll now move on to item public hearing. Thank you. Public hearing 0-2017.
No,
Now we need to
Oh.
move on the item.
That's right.
Yeah, the first one was an amendment to the proposed ordinance, and now we have the
Now I'll make a
actual
motion, we
underlying
approve
ordinance.
our 2017 as amended.
Second.
Is that motion made in accordance with public necessity?
Public
Absolutely.
facility,
General
general
welfare and
convenience, all
Absolutely.
of the things. General welfare, all that stuff.
Keep it.
And we have a motion, Mr. Tucker, did you second it?
I did.
We have a motion and a second now, please. Thank you.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Nordvig?
Aye.
Mrs. Cabell?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Brett. We'll now move on to public hearing on R 2017-25, case number 1704. County Town, Powhatan requests the amendment and reenactment of zoning ordinance of the County of Powhatan, Chapter 83. And Mr. Sheridan, you taking this one?
Yes, sir. So this one, we have an applicant come in. They have an existing home on Route 60, Zone A10, that was built to approximately the current 100-foot front yard setback. They wish to add a covered porch to the building in upgrading it. looking at that, our ordinance currently does not have any exception for a covered porch, and they could not comply with the 100-foot setback. Looked at the possibility of a variance, but because it's not a hardship, not necessarily grounds for a variance. So we were asked to look at the ordinance and see what could be done to potentially accommodate that. So a couple potential options here. One that the Planning Commission looked at was simply amending the A10 setback on limited access arterial roads from 100 feet back to, I think what it was pre-1996 to 75 feet. Planning Commission reviewed that, considered it, thought that that opened it up to too many other roads and properties that may not be appropriate to have that much of a reduced setback. So they recommended 3-2 denial of that request. The two dissenting votes were interested, I believe, in looking at maybe allowing that setback in a more focused area, maybe just Route 60 or portions of Route 60. But in that motion, the Planning Commission also requested staff to bring back an amendment to address covered porches specifically. As you recall, probably 2 months ago now, we had that Sowers rezoning to deal with the covered porch issue, very similar. In that case, it had inadvertently already been constructed. So again, we have on 60 covered porch encroaching 2-3 feet into the setback. So that will be coming before the Planning Commission likely in October as a separate amendment. That was in a separate section of the ordinance, so we couldn't simply go into a different section and amend it as part of this. We had to stick to the chapter that was advertised for the public hearing. So that'll be coming. But if the board sees fit to address the issue tonight for A10, again, a couple recommendations or options here. One would be to adopt what the Planning Commission recommended denial of. That would be reducing the setback across the board. A second option would be reducing it only on Route 64 A10 properties, not 711, 522, all of these other roads that could potentially be applied to. Or then option 3 would be to make an exception for the covered porches. Could only be done for A10 since we only advertised for changing the A10 district, but you could make a footnote essentially that says the front yard setback in A10 along limited access highways is 100, but see footnote that covered porches open on 3 sides may extend up to 10 feet or whatever distance the board sees fit into the front yard setback. That would address the applicant's option, allow the Planning Commission time to work on a fix county-wide, since this is something that appears to be an issue. And we've seen some other localities have this exception that we would consider.
Any questions of staff at this time?
Of course.
Go ahead.
Your recommendation is?
Staff would recommend option 3. I think that would be the least impact. It would allow the applicant to do what they wish to do, and then the Planning Commission can take their time, evaluate the pros and cons of something more comprehensive. I think the other options, again, might be good in some areas, but also opening up that setback in other areas, may allow development closer to 60 or other roads than would be desired. So staff would recommend option 3. Again, Planning Commission didn't really look at that, so their recommendation was purely on across the board, and they recommended denial there.
I'm gonna follow up if that's all right.
Go ahead.
I think there's a couple things I'm looking at anyway. One, the man wants to put a porch on the front of his house, which makes it better looking. And, the original intent was to keep 60 in this area of the county beautiful. And we're talking a few feet, and the guy is making his house look better. So I think, just from a common sense point of view, we should make that happen. That's what I think. There's 5 of us up here, but that's my input on that part. The other is, I don't like the long menu. I agree with you, is what I'm saying. I don't like the long menu of all these specific roads and, this road yes, that road no. I agree that the Planning Commission should take a deeper dive on this one. And, but I think everybody would acknowledge that Route 60 is our main artery / commercial corridor through Powhatan County. And I don't know, I feel comfortable acting on that road. And so I would tend to agree with, it fixes the applicant's problem. It allows time for us to do this right. And I think that's what would make sense. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Williams.
Brett, isn't the setbacks based on the classification of the road? Don't you have a different setback for arterials, a different setback for collector roads?
Correct, yep.
And I'm guessing that the reason you have a different setback is because the road that's going to get widened is going to be the road that's carrying the most traffic.
Yeah, it would be looking at, one of the factors in the setback would be the ultimate right-of-way.
So we know one day, you know, we're going to need 6 lanes on Route 60 at certain places. We know we're going to need 4 lanes west of 522 on Route 60. So I'm very reluctant to start reducing setbacks on Route 60. I go into the issue about wanting to put something over the stoop, a roof over it. What's the limitation on the size? How far can that stoop go out into the, you know, into the setback? I mean, it doesn't say 3 feet. It could be, you could have a stoop with a covered stoop. It could be any number of feet out going into the front yard. Is that correct?
So currently, yeah, you could have an uncovered stoop all the way up to your
Yeah, because you don't
completely-
see on the, what's on the ground, flat in the ground.
Correct. So the proposal here, again, what I'm calling option 3 would be 10 feet, could be less. Some localities have 5 foot, but would limit it to that and require that it be open on 3 sides. So again, somebody doesn't enclose in an extra 5 or 10 feet, call it their porch and get more buildable area. Again, this would be limited to an open covered porch.
I've always been very cautious about changing an ordinance based on one situation or 2 situations. You want to be very careful when you do that. You want to go back to why you had the ordinance in place in the beginning, and if it's still a good idea, you ought to keep it there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Tucker, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I look at this a little bit differently. I go back to our strategic plan and our agreement that we're going to commercially develop Route 60. So I'd propose that we set the setback on Route 60 for the entire length of Route 60 to 75 feet. Goes against what you just said, Mr. Williams. But I'm very uncomfortable doing the same for 711, 522, and 13. So the motion would say specifically, set the setback off of Route 60 to 75 feet for the entire length of Route 60 through Powhatan County, period. No reference to any of the other arterial roads. And the reasoning behind that is because we've agreed that 60 is our commercial goal vein, and we're going to develop 60 the best we possibly can within reason. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other comments? Questions of staff?
Just one, and I don't mean to nitpick, David, but I agree with you that, I agree with you that a one-off situation is not a good reason to change a law, but I know from discussion, and Brett just said it tonight, that this appears to be an issue. This is not a one-time situation that we've never seen before and won't ever see again. This actually does happen frequently enough that it deserves attention. Is that correct?
So in the time I've been here, a year, it would be 2 times we've had it come up. Other staff might be able to speak more historically.
Okay.
So,
And the other example was the Sowers case, right?
Correct.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
a little,
Isn't the Sowers case different because that also discussed dual frontage?
Yes.
So that's
Yes,
different.
good point.
so, and you're right, Ms. Cabell, it is.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may.
Go ahead, and I'll.
What are you going to do, Brett, when you reduce, as Carson's proposed, to 75 feet, and somebody comes in, they've gone over 2 feet on the setback? What are you going to do then? Are you going to change it to 65?
The board could always consider reducing it further. As far as staff, I don't think we would propose that. It would be an enforcement action,
I'm
I
just
think.
saying, I mean, it's.
Sure, what's the
If,
limit?
if somebody misses, you know, the measurement on, you know, what we have now, if we reduce it to 75, what happens if they miss the measurement that time? Are you going to further reduce the setback?
So,
I don't think that solves the problem, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank
I
you.
think Carson knows what I'm saying.
thank you, Mr. Williams. So Brett, I think in reading and listening to Planning Commission meeting, there were 2 board members, 2 Planning Commission members, excuse me, that were interested in allowing the reduction to go to 75 feet. And then there was much dialogue about, you know, is this the right way to do it, and should we just allow the porches to be handled separately? I tend to agree with Mr. Williams. In my years on the Planning Commission, it was very dangerous to start one-offing opportunities. In many of the 60 rezonings that would be proposed, the setbacks are much less than 75 feet in those, if I remember correctly, from what's in the comp plan and what's in the zoning and subdivision ordinances.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. A10 is the most restrictive as far as front setback. Other commercial districts, village districts are 75, some of them, I believe, 60 maybe.
So you would be reducing them, and if somebody chose not to come in for a rezoning, then they could use the 75, but if they did, then they would have to apply for the rezoning. And in that type of rezoning, then the setback would be required based upon the zoning classification you're moving to.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, any other questions of staff? Thank you. We'll now open the public hearing on ordinance 2017-25. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward at this time.
Betty Handy, 3171 Jude's Ferry Road. I suppose everybody knows that Jude's Ferry Road is right at Route 711. And though I doubt that in my lifetime they will make that 4 lanes, but who knows? But I wish we would have a little bit more shoulders on some of these roads, and that requires property. And if you start reducing these setbacks, I think you're going down a very slippery slope. I was at the Planning Commission and heard all of the discussion, as well as a person who has the problem. And it seems like to change ordinances for one issue would be a very bad mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Handy, for your comments.
Bill Ryan, 6459 Anderson Highway. The piece of property in question is mine, okay? And Brent did the best he could with it. The issue is, I could have done, like half the county has come in there and used whiteout for 5 feet, okay? And nobody would have questioned it. Nobody would have gone up there and measured it, but I have more integrity than that, okay? The issue is simply this. When that building was built, the setback from 60 was 60 feet in 1991, not 100 feet, Mr. Williams. The other thing is, I have 105 feet and I want 5 more additional feet. And when I went to the county and I asked, why is Route 60 up there different? Their excuse to me was for beautification. And I said, don't make me tell you how stupid what you just said to me is with what I'm requesting to do. Kind of sounds really facetious to me. To sit back when I'm going to take a plain Jane building and put a nice front porch on it to add beautification from the road view, which I have plenty of up there, and make it better. I said, well, what about a variance of 5 feet? Well, the county attorney says to the employees of the county, that unless you have a hardship, you're not going to get 5 feet variance. And of course, I can be a little arrogant sometimes, and I go, you want to bet? Don't make me turn this into a legal battle with this board over 5 feet. I will. And the other thing is simply this. A 5-foot variance, I don't care how I get the 5 feet. I don't have a lot of copies. But I want you to pass that around to them and take a look at what the front of the building looks like with the porch on it. And then take the porch away in your mind and you have a plain Jane building with 2 big windows sitting there. Now, I did the right thing and I didn't use whiteout. I bet you if I went in there and made you go back over the county's record and y'all go check every one of those little additions and stuff that have been done, boy, I could make a real interesting subject for y'all to deal with. All I want is 5 feet to make the porch 10 foot out. I have 105 feet setback, which means I need 5 more feet. And There's sometimes you just say, oh, well, you can't fight the county, and then there's sometimes you say, the heck you can't. According to the state, if that building was built and it had only 60 feet setback, it's just like when I remodeled that place and turned it into a house. I don't have to go by the new building codes. I don't know if the board's aware of that. I have to go by the codes in 1991. Well, the state says if that setback was 60 feet, you're going to have a hard time in court expressing why you're not going to give me that variance to put that 5 feet. That when that building was built, the people who built it in good faith put it back 105 feet when it was only a 60-foot setback. So what are you going to do to every home that exists? Tell the person they can't improve their home because the board, at some given point, decided to change it to 100 feet? You see what kind of problem you've got? It isn't fair to the people who are trying to do exactly what the ordinance, the extra 25 feet, according to what y'all designed that extra 25 feet for 160, was for beautification. Now, do you think that porch beautifies that building and adds to it from the road appeal? Or does it distract from it? Which one? The point is, there's got to be a simple way. To me, the simple way would have been to agree to give me a 5-foot variance. Even this lady sitting here said, well, why didn't you ask for variance? I said, because somebody got it in their mind that they ran the county instead of the board. And said that we're not giving any variances unless they're hardships. I don't know why y'all would tell the public that before they even apply for variance. Do you? I mean, can somebody up there tell me how that happened? I'd like to know. Because I thought this board made the decisions for the county, but it's obvious somewhere along the line somebody got confused here and started telling county employees that we're not granting any variances unless it creates a hardship. There are so many things going on that could raise questions, gentlemen, that you don't want to get into. All you need to do is stop and think what is fair to your citizens that are trying to live in the county and pay their taxes and do what is right. I took a piece of junk that was an eyesore, and y'all are sitting there going, make this house over 5 feet, and I got a building right next to me that sits there falling down, overrun with weeds, trash, garbage, but yet there it sits, and nobody does anything about that. And it's only 30 feet back, and it's commercial property. I got to live with that, but you don't hear me coming in here saying, oh, I want you to enact on this and do this and everything. That's that person's piece of property, and what they do with it is their business in my book. But I need 5 feet to do the 10-foot porch. And I don't think that you should put your citizens at a point to where they have to use whiteout to get what they want. I hope the board knows that they don't check those survey stickers when they go in there. If you sit there and you white that out and you mark on that line that you got 110 feet back from 60, they give you the permit. If you got 105, they said, no, you're 5 feet past. It just doesn't make a lick of sense to me. And the other thing to answer y'all's question is, when that road was put in, from the pins, there is already room to make that a 4-lane highway without intruding into the property owner's property. Did y'all know that? I don't think you do. That when they designed 60 out there, the state pins were put back another 20 feet from the edge of the road to allow for expansion. In other words, my property pin, y'all say that I front 60, but technically I don't, because the state owns 20 feet from my pin out. So now there's another question. Do you have the right to govern me as if I front 60? I don't think so. State owns that 15, 20 feet. Wonder what kind of problem that could create.
Mr. Bryant, can you slowly wrap this together, please? Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll wrap it up. Anyway, point is, I don't care how they do it. I need 5 feet to complete the porch. But one way or the other, I intend to try to get it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions of staff or comments?
I have a question. Tom, the gentleman said that the 60-foot setback from Route 60 was in effect back when the building was built, and he also said, I believe, that the ordinance and building codes revert back to that time when the building was put in. Is that correct, that we are obligated under the Code of Virginia to go by those two things?
No, and in fact, the building, I think if I give you the building code analogy, it makes perfect sense. A building that was built 30 years ago, you don't have to today bring it up to code, but if you add an addition to it, whatever you do new has to go to the current code. This building is a proper, existing at where it was, if it was at 55 feet, it'd be perfectly proper, but it's when you do an addition, the addition has to comply with the new code.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, follow up. There was another issue as it related to being able to grant a variance due to hardship. What does the Code of Virginia say to that?
Well, the county actually has nothing to do with granting variances, Mr. Williams. That's, the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is appointed by the Circuit Court, grants variances. We don't have any authority under our ordinance to grant variances. Any variance request has to be an application to the BZA, and there's a fee associated with that. And the BZA is the one that is the only one empowered in this county to grant variances.
Mr. Chairman, I have
Go ahead.
one more question. Brett, was that discussed as an option, the BZA?
I believe it was with the applicant, with some other staff in the department. Again, staff doesn't grant variances, as Tom rightly stated.
Well, I know that, but was it discussed with him that the BZA was an avenue for relief?
The variance was discussed, and I believe the feedback that was given was staff didn't believe this rose to the level of a hardship. So BZA, they're an independent body, they could still grant whatever they wish, but we do try to advise people so they don't come in, apply, spend that non-refundable fee, and try to get something that wouldn't actually meet a hardship. So I think that was the advice that was given, that we wouldn't call it a hardship. BZA could still grant it, but we don't want people necessarily applying without that knowledge.
Well, let me go back to the county attorney. We had the issue over in Lake Shawnee where they would, the BZA was granting variances for lots over there because they couldn't get the setbacks that they needed. Tom, I believe you said that they shouldn't be doing that because the lots over there were pretty much all the same, that that individual lots weren't distinct and different, constituting a hardship.
State law regulates variances, and basically what state law says is if the BZA can just hand out variances when it feels appropriate, your zoning ordinance becomes meaningless and your setbacks become meaningless. The BZA sets your zoning. So there's a list of requirements. Hardship is sort of the one-word summary of those requirements.
Right.
A little bit more technical description would be the state law says you have to have so unique a situation that you're so different from everybody else in the county that it would be unfair to not give you a variance because of the uniqueness of your property. And that's the state law standard.
I thought I'd recall that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Brett, in Mr. Tucker's comments, he asked that the reduction be 75 feet along 60. Would that allow, so if something's currently not in the A10, because this is for A10, is it not?
Correct. This
So
would,
it's
whatever
not-
we do here tonight would only address A10.
A10. So if it's RC, it's not in the A10 district, then it wouldn't, the setback would not be reduced to 75 feet.
No. Although I believe in RC it already may be 75.
It is.
Yeah.
Many years back, we reduced it in there as we were running into some cases where some things challenged the good, smart development of a parcel, so we did reduce it to 75. Okay. That's the only question I have.
Let me see if I understand. Is his property in RC or agriculture?
A10 agriculture.
A10 agriculture.
Any other questions of staff? Couple comments. So, Mr. Tucker, I like your proposed, if you're going to make it some form of motion, but hang on with that.
Okay.
I do not want to write ordinance for one individual situation, nor do I want to be Anybody that tries to threaten the county and tries to intimidate to make us pass an ordinance is not reason I would ever support an ordinance. I will support the reduction to 75 feet because it makes good zoning sense, and good zoning sense only. I will not. As far as variances, Mr. Latchney has coached us very well on variances, that we don't willy-nilly grant those, and it's a consistency factor that we need to do, and that consistency will be done across all segments of citizens, no matter who's standing in front of us. So I am in support of the 75-foot reduction in the A10 area, as Mr. Tucker has, I don't think he's proposed it, but will propose. That's all my only comments.
You ready for the motion?
I am.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we direct staff to set the setback to 75 feet on the entire length of Route 60 for any property zoned A10.
And that motion is based on public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning
Mr.
practices.
Latchney, I have a question. So, and I apologize. This is actually case 26, and the previous case was 25. So on our agenda, they were misnumerated. So it was, the first one was 0-2017-25. This is case 0-2026. So his motion is for case 0-2026, and then I need to ask your opinion on how we would fix the previous case.
Mr.
Those
Chairman, numbers are internal, those
Yeah.
are clerical assignments,
Okay.
they're not part of the
I
actual
just don't want
ordinance.
anybody getting their feathers ruffled.
Yeah, no, those are just numbers staff assigns to these things, but they're not actually part of the ordinance.
Okay.
And just for clarification, we did, there are new agendas on the back table, and I think we've talked about the subject matter and with good clarity, and the online version conforms to the numbering scheme that you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, so I think everybody's in alignment. I
Just
appreciate you
anyone.
checking on it.
And just kind of an informational sidebar that you'll find interesting, even the code section numbers aren't part. Those are actually assigned by the publisher of your code. So even the publisher of the code could technically change our code section numbers even after we approve it, and that would be perfectly proper.
Thank you, Mr. Latchney. So Mr. Tucker's put a motion in front of us. I will second that motion. Any questions or comment of the motion as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
just going to reiterate quickly, again, my comment. If you reduce it to 75 feet, if somebody mismeasures, the next time, this is not going to solve the problem. You're going to still have the same issue. Now, you've had 2 cases in the last year, Brett, I believe is what he said. That's hardly an avalanche. And I'm going to go back and echo what Bill said, back on the Planning Commission. You never want to go and start making changes to your ordinance that you had in place for a good reason because of 2 cases. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Is there any other way we can let this man build his porch? Because that's really, the guy owns a house that was built when it was 60 feet setback. He's making the property better. He's already made the property better. I don't want to be a sea lawyer here and, get every little jot and tittle correct. And meanwhile, all this guy wants to do is build a front porch on his property that makes it prettier. Is there any other way we can do this?
Staff, we looked exhaustively at the ordinance, because again, just thinking about adding the porch, by itself doesn't sound like a major issue, but there's no vehicle in the ordinance for staff to approve a deviation. Applicant could always take their chance with applying to the BZA. Again, staff can't assume what they may or may not approve. Again, of the options before you, option 3, only pertaining this to covered porches would do it, but that's more limited than the other one that's currently on the table. But yeah, otherwise, again, we looked at our ordinance. There's just no flexibility in there for something like this.
I hear you, Mr. Norvig. Thank you for the question. We have worked on the setbacks on 60 many times. As we know, as duly noted by staff, we reduced RC to 75. So why would we have an 75-foot RC setback and we're out in A10, which is going to have less vehicle trips per day, and we're talking about 8 yards? I'm just a little perplexed. I think that's why I support the 75 feet, because it's good zoning. I'm not supporting it because it's of one citizen or 100 citizens. I think it's good zoning. The 75 feet is fine in my eyes. So. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Yes, I have a staff question.
Good.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
Brett, covered porches, uncovered porches are currently allowed.
Correct, they can extend into any setback all the way up to 60, side yard, rear yard.
So instead of a broad sweeping brush of all A10 on Route 60, why don't we just add the word covered?
And that would roughly be what option 3 that staff had proposed would do, would allow covered porches within the setback. It wouldn't, if we took that code language that allows the uncovered ones to extend and just eliminated the word covered, then that would allow you to do a covered porch all the way up to right on 60. I don't think that would be the intent, but again, what staff had proposed here for option 3 would allow a 10-foot encroachment in your front yard setback with a covered porch open on 3 sides. So that would be kind of the closest thing to, I think, get at what you're
So
describing.
you're proposing 10-foot reduction. Mr. Tucker's motion says 25-foot reduction, and you don't open up a covered porch running all the way to 60. Maybe it'd be a covered porch that the guy wants to, put his picnic table right on the side of 60. To me, that's unsafe, so.
But he can put his uncovered porch on the side of 60.
Maybe we need to look at that ordinance also, but,
Back to the awning.
Call for the question.
All right,
thank you.
all right.
It was a very good, Ms.
Yeah.
Cabell, was a very good question, so. Okay. It's a roll call vote, is it not?
So as I understand it, the motion
Is to reduce
is
it
to reduce the setbacks on US 60 to 75 feet for the A10 zoning district.
for A10.
And we have a motion by Mr. Tucker and a second by Mr. Melton. Am I
That's
correct,
correct.
sir? Roll call. Mr. Williams.
No.
Mr. Nordvig.
Aye.
Mrs. Cabell.
No.
Mr. Melton.
Aye.
Mr. Tucker.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 13, the second of our 2 public comment periods. We invite members of the public to please come forward at this time and speak.
Good evening, Jim Carver. I live at 4245 Steger Creek Drive, Powhatan, Virginia, and I signed in. I originally came tonight just to speak about the recent public forum for the Planning Commission held on the 20th, but I caught wind of something during the discussions I wanted to make a comment on too about performance-based budgeting. As a citizen who understands performance-based budgeting, I want to thank you for pursuing that. I know it takes a long time, and it's going to take time to transition, both culturally and from a business process reengineering standpoint, but outstanding path to be on, and it's greatly appreciated. Mr. Norvig's absolutely correct. It allows for prioritization. It's needs-based budgeting. And Mr. Tucker's absolutely right. It allows you to align to your strategic vision, goals, and plans. So it's a great idea. So I appreciate it. As I said, I attended the recent Planning Commission Public Forum on the 20th, and I wanted to make a few comments about that. First off, it was a great event. If you already don't know, the staff did a tremendous job. Brett and his whole team were there. 4 out of the 5 Planning Commission members were there. There were former members of the Planning Commission there. I think I saw 50 to 60, 70 citizens there. And it was interactive. It was experiential. There were staff members taking the time to sit down with citizens at the table, break out a map, and explain. There was also, I think Brett would admit, that he probably learned a lot from the citizens. I think it was probably as good experience for him and his staff as it was for the citizens to be involved with the staff. So it was a tremendous success from what I saw. And I hope as many people show up on the 28th. It's transparency in action. It's not just transparency in action. We put a bunch of boards on the wall and you can look at the map. There was dialogue and debate and discussion. So it was really, really good. I say all that though, you know, I just wanted to offer some of my thoughts. I'm not going to be able to be there on the 28th, but I spoke to dozens of citizens myself, as I am naturally overt, and some themes I picked up on, and I'll make sure I stick to my 3 minutes. Some themes I picked up on that I wanted to share. Number one, a majority of these people I spoke to, matter of fact, everybody that I spoke to, I didn't encounter anybody, but everybody I spoke to is an advocate for maintaining the gaps along Route 60. Don't do that. Maintaining the gaps along Route 60, i.e. Flat Rock to Red Lane, for example. I think 99% of the people who were there were in favor of that. The other theme that I mentioned or I picked up on were many people seemed perplexed. You know, they were trying to understand the dynamic between the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Many people seemed perplexed that there were many times where the Planning Commission may say no on something, but yet it gets through the Board of Supervisors. Another item that I picked up on, and this concerned me, and I'm not saying this is my position, but it just concerned me. There were many people that said to me, well, gosh, what's going to happen when the comp plan gets in front of the Board of Supervisors? It'll change. And that just was a little disconcerting because, you know, many of the other folks I talked to imagined that the Board of Supervisors and the staff will certainly, I'm going to use the word entrust, that the Planning Commission and Brett and his staff have done yeoman's work and brought together a pretty good comp plan. So I wanted to convey that to you all because that's something I picked up on that kind of made me wonder why that perception is there. But back to close on a positive note, very transparent event, great attendance. That's the kind of thing that really, I think, breaks down those barriers with the citizens so they don't think something's happened and they don't know about. So congratulations, well done.
Thank you, Mr. Carver, for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward at this time. Now I'll close the second public comment period. We'll move on to county attorney comments.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
We'll move on to item 15, county administrator comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of items. I did want to inform the public, if you hadn't seen it already, of the good news that we received notice of being selected by the State Economic Development Partnership for an economic gardening grant. And so I want to recognize Mr. Chardine and his team for working together to get one of our local businesses to apply. And so that is a new project or a new program where there will be a focus on growing the business internally as opposed to recruiting businesses from out of state. So we're very excited about that, and there'll be more to come on that. We also were fortunate to learn of being selected to receive the Governor's Technology Award for our website. And so we want to bring our IT staff here at a future meeting and let them smile and take a picture and get the recognition from the board they deserve for a very engaging citizen portal. And we're proud of that, and we'll keep doing work in that regard. We also want to recognize staff for participating in our Play Day RVA, which is part of the overall Playful Communities recognition. We partnered, with our region to all apply to be recognized for a commitment to recreation, part of a balanced and healthy lifestyle, and we were recognized with all the counties and cities in the region collectively, and so that was a celebration. We spent a couple of hours on and off at the administration building in some very, very deadly games of cornhole and can jam and those kinds of games. So nice to see the competitive spirit across our workforce and a little camaraderie. And I was completely destroyed by Tom Nolan, so I will have to get him back. Maybe I'll practice on the weekends. I want to thank Sheriff Nunnally for inviting me to participate in the Habitat for Humanity fundraiser last week. Got to meet a couple of his really, really sharp deputies who've been working extra hours to solve some cases, and it was nice to get them out of the office and let them chill out a little bit with their boss and support a worthy cause. Habitat made a pitch for how they're quietly building some affordable homes for some of our residents, and made particular note of the need to support some of our entry-level and young government employees, particularly firefighters, who we saw some today, who have families, who are challenged with finding homes they can afford in our great community. Same thing with deputies, and I would assume as well teachers and others. So more to come on that as we work together to move forward on providing affordable housing for our workforce. I also want to acknowledge the comp plan event on the 28th. Encourage citizens to go to that. Thanks to the library for hosting that. Also let the public know and the board know that we are underway with our strategic planning for our fire and rescue services, and that has kicked off last week. We're going to have another meeting on the 27th. Be assured all the fire and rescue agencies are invited to attend, and many have sent representatives. I think everybody's committed to come to the next session, and the idea is to make sure we support one another and provide a fully integrated service, back each other up, because ultimately boundaries don't matter and agencies don't matter. We just need to get help to our citizens however we can best do it and support each other. So I want to appreciate Chief Singer taking the bull by the horns to get that rolling. And I have one other thing down here. Oh yes, I wanted to thank the school board and the school administration for their great presentations at the last meeting. Really enjoyable tours, and let the board know that we're reviewing the MOU for fleet maintenance, and our plan is to put that on the board meeting for next month. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any board comments? I just have.
Real quickly.
Go ahead.
We have a situation over at the Black Hawk Gym where I received several phone calls about being able to get in and out off of Route 60. Called Kevin Reichert, our district engineer. Kevin got right on it. He was working with the developer to put in a temporary ingress and egress off of 60 that's safe. So people called and thanked me when they saw the work going on. I said the thanks goes to VDOT and to Kevin. So just wanted folks to know.
Mr. Chairman, let me piggyback on that from Mr. Reichert, because I've also found him to be very responsive. He's fixed a problem in my district where we had a killer curve. It's been a killer curve for 25 years, and we met there with the property owner who was adjacent to it, and he had a fix just like that. And those signs are up, and what we did to change the thing, we're done. We're very lucky to have Kevin replacing the VDOT people who were here before. Bravo.
Thank you. The only quick thing I have is to the board and county administrator is I'm working with Dominion Virginia Power to take a tour of the solar farm. So what I'd like is if you can, I'll give you some dates here, the 10th, the 12th, or the 13th of October at around 4 o'clock. If you can be any of those dates, I can coordinate getting a tour of the facility, and you can see the progress that's been made. I've actually got a couple citizens I'm taking out on a third who has expressed some interest. For those in the public, eventually you'll be able to have an observation area that you can look at the solar farm. That's part of their approval rezoning. This is for us to kind of get an update. So if you get back with me the 10th, the 12th, or the 13th, and I'll coordinate through them who you'll see, but around 4 o'clock is what they suggested. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of quick ones, too.
Okay.
We received a letter from the county administrator in Amelia to thank us for the loan of Lucky Hill out of social services. Lucky Hill for us oversees the community services department of court-appointed youth who are in trouble, to keep them, to divert them from going to jail. And he not only diverts them, he educates them. The recidivism rate is great, And the county administrator said that 35 out of 35 kids that were put on the Lucky's responsibility, 33 of them have turned out good. This is the kind of investment in human resources we all need. Secondly, the James River cleanup this year went from Lynchburg to Hampton. We had 90 bags of trash. About half of those were recyclables. And believe it or not, Powhatan got the award for the most unusual thing pulled out of the river between Lynchburg and Hampton. It was an urn with grandmother's ashes in it. Not joking. And last thing, we have a new nonprofit in the county. I invited, we had a fancy meeting of something called Sowing Seeds, where the lady who lost her husband is trying to turn part of her house into a place to take care of people who lose their spouses and have financial difficulties on a temporary basis. So bravo to people stepping up without any government help, that she would actually open her home to people who need transportation or roofing or food or whatever it might be for a temporary period of time. Sowing Seeds. And there, Angela Ross from the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office is the chairman of that organization. Bravo to her. Mr. Timberlake, if you'll pass that on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, we'll go, Tom, who's leading us in closed session,
All right.
please?
Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan County desires to discuss in closed meeting the following: discussion and consideration of the performance of specific employees of the public body, discussion and consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, the financial interests of the governmental unit would be adversely affected, consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, whereas pursuant to sections 2.2, 3711A1, A6, A7, and A8 of the Code of Virginia, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Powhatan County is hereby authorized discussion of the aforesaid matters in closed meeting. Need that as a motion.
Moved.
Second. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Those opposed, we're in closed session. I hereby, are we back on? I hereby reconvene this regular meeting of the Powhatan County Board of Supervisors, open meeting, and request the clerk of the board to conduct a roll call certification vote of the supervisors to be included in the minutes of this meeting.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, I need to read the certifications. You certify, to the best of your knowledge, that the only matters discussed in the closed meeting were public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded. Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Nordvig?
Aye.
Mrs. Cabell?
Aye.
Mr. Melton?
Aye.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor of adjournment? Aye.